Okay, cool. So entrepreneurial operating system. So tell me about how you
That's
got
right.
involved with that.
EOS. It sounds a lot fancier than it is, and it's funny because I came into this world from the tech space. I ran e-commerce agencies for many years, so a lot of my contacts and my people, when I started doing this, automatically just assumed because it's called EOS that I'm somewhat involved in technology again. But it's not. Like there are pieces of technology that have operating systems. The most famous being iOS for your pocket slave that you have there, that iPhone that everybody has. So what is that? It's a piece of software that allows your phone to operate all the apps to work correctly and sync up with each other. So when we think about EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, what that is, it's a system, it's a framework that allows business owners, specifically entrepreneurial organizations, harness all of the human energy. Right? When you think about a business, it's a bunch of humans with emotions and egos and feelings and skill sets, unique skill sets and qualities that they all bring to the table to build that cohesive team. So EOS is about harmoniously synchronizing all of that. It's taking all that human energy, directing them into the right places. We like to say it helps you get good at three things: vision, traction, and healthy. Right? Vision in the sense that we gain extreme clarity over who we are as an organization, where we're going, what are all the steps it's going to take to get there in the short term and the long term. Then we have the traction element, that's building structure, accountability, discipline, execution of that vision so that it's not just a dream, it's actually becoming a reality, and getting all those players to contribute to that. And then the last part is the healthy element. I always like to explain healthy as the opposite of toxic, because everybody's been in that toxic relationship or environment before. But when you think about healthy, we want to make sure that we're building a fun-loving, cohesive, functional leadership team. Right? We as implementers work specifically with the leadership teams, getting them really, really strong in the various components of the business. But once you strengthen that leadership team and they're strong and they're operating in a smart and healthy way and gaining traction and executing really well, as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. Again, then gets filtered down. Everybody's getting a part in that vision and understanding their role in that and understanding why these things are important and what those goals are. Everyone has clarity on what their role is and what they're accountable to perform in the organization and doing those things. And again, healthy and enjoying working together and having fun while we're doing it is a very, very important part of things. Because if it's not fun, it's usually not worth doing, at least for me.
Right. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like a very idyllic type of existence. Is it does in its perfect form, do you see it working really smoothly and harmoniously?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's about 800, and I think 832 is the last count. I'm going to get the updated one when I meet with my team in Denver this week. But I think the last quarter was 832 implementers worldwide. There's over 25,000 companies worldwide that have run on EOS with a professional implementer, over 185,000 full session days that have been delivered by EOS implementers working with those leadership teams. So there's a considerable number of businesses that do it. EOS works because EOS works in its purest form. That's actually what I believe. I was able to run EOS within my past business, and that's what really triggered me to realize that this is what the life that I wanted to create for myself as a coach, because I ended up enjoying teaching and facilitating and coaching people using the tools more so than doing what I was doing and the product and service that I was bringing to market then. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously certain people that don't, that are detractors, so to speak, that don't get the value out of EOS. Most of the time it's because they're not necessarily willing to do the traction, right? Like everybody likes the vision component of like gaining that clarity on like, okay, this is our thing. In 10 years, we're going to be here. In 1 year, we're going to be here. But the traction element is, doing the stuff that you have to do and walking that talk, so to speak. And that's where I think some companies would struggle if they're not ready to like really change and embrace the operating system. When they go in, maybe, okay, that part of it works for me, but maybe not that part. So in its purest sense, yes, EOS definitely works for the right fit types of companies.
Yeah. And so I saw that you were CEO, like you mentioned, of of an e-commerce company. And is that where you first got introduced to EOS?
Yeah, yeah. So my first job out of college in 2000 when I was working in like a boiler room selling advertising and sports yearbooks. Terrible culture for me, at least at the point in time. I didn't, it was starting to wear on me. I was good at it, but it just wasn't where I wanted to spend the rest of my career. It wasn't the type of work that I wanted to be doing. So I started at an agency called Blue Switch in 2004. I was employee number 8. I stayed there for 13 years. I left. I was the COO. I actually started as a salesperson and was converted into a project manager when we realized that I was really, really bad at sales. But with my German background, that project management thing really, really clicked for me. I've always been very structured, oriented, results driven. So being the person on the forefront with some of our bigger clients that we were working with, being able to, understand what their requirements were, what their needs were, helping them execute that on time and on budget was just something that I was naturally gifted with the ability to do. And then I was able to take that and leverage it and, I was self-taught. I didn't really have like a system. I didn't go to school for that or anything. I literally got the book Project Management for Dummies and read through that to kind of figure out where I needed to start. But everything started to work. I realized, okay, now I started to, take on more of an active role in hiring, recruiting, and building a project management team and working closely with our development team in terms of what projects, which resources should be working on and where they should be allocating their time and how we were going to handle all the distribution of work and how to track budgets and create systems and processes. So I left in 2017 as the COO. At that point in time, we had added a considerable amount of people. That company is called Blue Switch, and I'm still very, very close to them today. I talk to them all the time. I left there on very, very good terms. It was a sad place to leave because the culture of that company was exceptional. I loved it there. They were my family. But I'm also a little bit of a glutton for punishment. I'm a little bit of a driven, as they say. So I was recruited to take over an agency called Pixify, which had been recently acquired about a year and a half into the acquisition by a larger parent organization called Net at Work. And I spent about 2 years trying to fix that business, taking a lot of the tools and systems that I put in place over at Blue Switch, thinking, oh, this can work over here. But we were dealing with a whole different set of issues. Culturally, we were dealing with issues with partners and platforms and customers that really weren't enjoying working with Pixify to that point. So I spent about 2 years slogging through it, a lot of swings and misses. We were kind of trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none. And nothing was really working as a result because we weren't super focused on anything. And then in the middle of 2019, about 2 years into that engagement, frankly, at a point where I was thinking, okay, maybe it's time for me to move on. Maybe I can't fix this thing. Net at Work, the parent company, had introduced us to EOS. They had started running on EOS as an executive team at the parent company level. And the way the organization was structured is you had 14 independent different business units that were all basically run by themselves. There's a practice director in charge of each of those. So I was the practice director, and we were accountable for the sales strategy, for the operational functions and processes and all of that. And we had some shared services, but they said, okay, you guys are going to run on this EOS thing. This is the new way that we're running our business, the new framework. So because I didn't have too much else going on at that point in time, it was really, really messy. And I'm a high fact finder, as we like to say. I'm very, very, when I find out about an idea, I really, really pressure test it and learn a lot. So I read all the books. I actually had a friend, my good friend Svi Schwartz, was just recently starting as an EOS implementer, and I didn't even realize it, that he had put an EOS into place in his old business to the degree that he realized that's what he wanted to do with his life. So I started to lean on him a little bit. I wanted to bring him in, but I wasn't allowed to. We had to do it as a self-implementation. And all of a sudden, everything clicked. Right? All of a sudden, like as I started to gain more clarity on what these tools were, I realized that none of them are like rocket science. These aren't silver bullets, magic pills, insert whatever phrase you want. They're practical, simple tools, things that have existed for hundreds of years and that'll probably exist for thousands more. But it created them into a system. It codified them, so to speak, where it put them into a framework that allows you to understand it easier, implement it more consistently, and really, really scale and grow. So as I started to learn more and more about how to properly set the vision for the company and what are the right questions to ask and how to set the right goals and build the right structure, it changed everything instantaneously. We took a business that was not making money at all for a couple of years, a few years, maybe even, and then all of a sudden turned it into a revenue generator with high margins of profit. We actually doubled the size of the business the year after. I was able to hire a really, really great team and move a few things around. We had a different type of structure when we started. About a year or two into that year in, we changed our structure. We started to do a lot more work overseas and building infrastructure to support that type of strategy from a development perspective. We developed some products. We found our market fit. We found exactly the types of products that we can go to market with. I brought in an integrator, right, which was my director of service and delivery. And her number one function was to keep me away from clients so that I could focus on strategy and sales and those strategic relationships. And that really changed everything for me because then we all of a sudden now had some runway and some bandwidth and some focus on our specific roles. And then after a couple of years of continuing to grow that business, I just got this entrepreneurial itch. Maybe aided a little bit by my buddy Tzvi pushing me to do this a little bit, but really understanding that I do have a unique value that I bring to the world. I'm able to take these complex concepts, and while EOS is simple, the implementation is not necessarily simple, but I realized that I had a knack for explaining it to other people and some of my sister practices, and and just really like realizing that I had this special gift that I could be a teacher, that I could be that inspiring coach that can help companies get where they need to go and help them process and break down their issues within this framework. And then the rest is history. Best professional decision I ever made.
Wow. I
Kind of a long
noticed,
answer for a short
I know,
question. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's fantastic. I noticed some buzzwords in there, and I'm wondering if like unique value, is that a strategic coach? Are you familiar with that?
Unique ability is the strategic coach term, I think, is
Unique
what they
ability.
use. And yeah, it's kind of geared in that, I have, we as EOS implementers are part of a big community of implementers. Like I said,
Yeah.
we're all very close with each other. We don't compete with each other. We actually support each other quite a bit. We refer each other business. The way that our practices work is we only need a handful of clients to have a very, very successful practice. You always want to be doing that biz dev and bringing in more and using whatever slots you have open. But we have our core values that tie us all together, right? We have our own purpose, our own mission within EOS worldwide that we have. But then each implementer, I like to say sometimes we're like a golf team because we do have our own practices. And as much as we're a part of that EOS community and we need to share those core values and we do share that same focus about helping entrepreneurs get what they want out of their business by teaching, facilitating, and coaching the use of these tools, every implementer has their own style, their own delivery, their own way of relating concepts to people. I happen to be a storyteller, and if you can't tell, I'm pretty comfortable in front of a microphone and in front of a crowd. So, I like to entertain people. I like people, I like people to have, I like to make jokes, maybe a little bit irreverently sometimes. We like to have fun because it doesn't have to be a slog, right? Like I've been in those businesses where it's just stress and it's focus and it's determination and, and it's all the things that we need to do, but without the fun. And, I want to be able to put the love in everything I do. I get to do that every day when I work with my clients, and I want them to have that same experience. So as I've started to venture into this, I've been able to hone in a little bit more on what I bring to the table. If somebody were to say, why should I work with you and not Implementer B, again, first off, if that person's good for them, I will 100% say, go work with Implementer B. Absolutely. But that's my style, and my style is what makes me unique. It's what helps me understand the concepts and what's going on at the table and what my clients are going through and empathizing with them. My experiences, I have, thank God, I've been blessed with an amazing memory. So I have tons of stories and anecdotes stuck in here, and I'm usually able to pull them out pretty quickly in the relevant moments to help people understand those concepts. And I think that that's really been, a key to my success in this role, I think.
Yeah. So let me ask you, at what point does someone engage the services of the OS? So is it a reactive type of scenario that they're in where they're struggling and they're kind of, gasping for air and they're just like, something's got to change? Or is it more proactive where they say, things are good, but they could be better? What usually
It's
is?
both. Yeah, it's both. It really depends on the mentality of the business. We like to say, I like to say at least, I love working with companies that have already succeeded despite themselves, right? And as you've grown to a certain threshold, our target market is typically between 10 and 250 employees. When you get to that 10 employee threshold, that's where the chaos starts to build up a little bit more. That's where things become a little bit more complex. And that tends to be where companies start to think about, okay, we need to do things different. But it's businesses that have hit a ceiling, right? They've gotten their business to a certain point and they've operated a certain way. And EOS is the way for them to break through that ceiling, to give context to a lot of decisions. Many people don't even think about what their goals are for the year. They're just trying to go day to day, month to month. Revenue is king. Let's just grow this business and see where it goes. But at a certain point in time, you realize okay, well, what are we pushing for? What is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And when you're able to hone in on that, it helps. So there are some companies that come to that realization before they go through an immense amount of pain. And then there are other companies that have to experience the pain in order to do that. I'll meet with a client every once in a while or a prospective client, and they love the process. They love the tools. They think it can work for their business, but they're actually not feeling that pain right yet. They feel like they've got things under control for now. And when the pain comes, then they're ready to have that conversation again. And, that's part of why we do the things we do. Every conversation I approach is a conversation with no expectations, just geared towards helping. And when the time comes that person needs me, hopefully they'll give me a call, but you can't make the need like that. EOS is actually not something that you can cold call or sell into somebody. They didn't know that it existed and they don't know where the opportunities in the organization lie. They're not going to be interested. It's going to be like, okay, cool, you're a consultant. Great. I don't need another consultant.
Right.
But when they start to experience some of those pains, we always like to say, what do businesses want? What does a business really want to get out of their business? So it's something that we call the EOS life, which is really one of 5 things, or maybe multiple of those 5 things. It's doing what you love with the people you love, making a huge impact, being compensated appropriately, with time to pursue other passions, right? So there are some business owners who are very, very successful businesses, but they don't really like what they're doing in that organization. Like the work that they're doing and the value they're adding is not rewarding to them, or they're having a hard time surrounding themselves with good people that can get them to the next level, or they feel like the work that they're doing is not that meaningful, and it's just, they're making some money and there's cash flow, but because it's not adding impact or value necessarily the way they want, it's not necessarily scalable. Right. Certainly everybody can relate, I think, to wanting to be compensated more appropriately and to make more and earn more money. I don't like to say make more money. I like to say earn more money. And then finally, the last one, and I think this is the one that I like to hone in on more, is, there's a lot of business owners that spend 18 hours working every day, right? Where, you're constantly going from fire to fire, right? And we want to turn people from firefighters into smoke detectors so that they can enjoy life, right? Like a guiding principle of how I operate is we don't live to work, we work to live. Right. So if we have lives, if we have family, if we have all these other things that we want to do in and out of work, sports and concerts and live music and travel and all these other things that people, occupy their time with, that they love doing, that they're working really, really hard to be able to do more of, a lot of the times that's the thing that the business owner needs is how do I just have a better life while I'm running this successful organization? So, we're really designed to help with any and all of those types of deficiencies.
Yeah. So you said typically the minimum amount of employees is about 10. What kind of how does that organization differ from a huge organization when you come in? Is it a little bit more all hands on deck versus when you have 200 employees? There's clearly a divide between the leadership team and the employees, and things may be siloed. What are your
Yeah.
experiences with those?
Yeah, I think you could say that. I think, and again, that 10 to 250 number is, the rule, but there obviously are exceptions, right? And even at that 10 threshold, there's different types of companies that are, they might have 10 employees, 5 of them are corporate employees, 5 of them are the technicians. You might have some companies where it's one owner with like 9 technicians, and those two companies are operating very differently. So to that point, that one owner, 9 technicians, that's the person that's maybe lacking the structure, that's doing a little bit of everything and doing the sales and running operations and sending the bills and managing the bookkeeper and doing all the financial stuff as well. But to answer your question about, the size of organization, what those implementations look like, yes, typically when you come into a larger organization, there is a great amount of structure already in place. There's a great amount of clarity even in place about what they want to set their goals at and what their vision should be and how they can even get there, right? They usually, a 200-person company, a lot of the times has figured a lot of those things out. But I always like to say what got us here is not necessarily what's going to get us where we need to go, right? So they'll get to a point where maybe they had a hyper infusion of growth and hired a bunch of new employees and brought their head count up. And then they realize right after that, whoa, we just made a huge mistake. We didn't need all these people, or we brought in the wrong types of people. And bigger organizations go through that as well. And they need that opportunity sometimes to regroup and rethink about how we're structuring ourselves. I always like the structure really guides the meetings of a company. So when you start to see that your meetings are all over the place and you have different people discussing different things and maybe not the right people, for larger organizations, that can become a very, very magnified problem. If you have 200 people sitting in 2-3 hours worth of meetings that they shouldn't be in every week, just take the dollar calculations on their, whatever you're paying them potentially by hour prorated, and that's a lot of money and there's a lot of savings. So just coming into a large organization, helping them regroup and figure out how to structure themselves and where they should be meeting and when, that adds a tremendous amount of value there. Whereas the smaller organizations, they're trying to think maybe even about who our next 2 to 4 hires are going to be, right? Like when it's that organization that's the single owner who kind of runs things and he has all these technicians, EOS is going to help him gain clarity over how he wants to structure himself in the next 6 to 12 months and create that framework for how he is going to grow his team strategically and bring in the right people. So, but at the same time, like you see a lot of those issues with larger companies. You see a lot of the issues that larger companies deal with within smaller companies sometimes, where you do have a lot of people that are struggling with those meetings as well. So, it's the same set of tools. It's the same process. And even if you're under that threshold of 10 people, like the EOS processes and methodologies can help any business. You're just probably not going to have the budget or the need to bring in a professional implementer if you're not at that threshold, so to speak. But it really is for everybody.
Right. Tell me some of the common pitfalls that you encounter with leaders when they're running a company, whether it's
Common pitfalls.
personality, whether
Do you
it's
have more than an hour? No, just kidding. You know, like it's a struggle. You know, you have certain business owners that really struggle with simplification, right? Like where they, you know, there's a lot of complexity in their business, and they harness and they hold all that complexity, and they keep it like boxed up and hold on to it all, and it becomes very complicated, and people don't understand really outside of that room what's going on. A lot of times you'll have leaders who are very reluctant to delegate the right things, you know, like either because they feel like nobody can do it better than them, or they're just lacking the resources and the people, or the clarity on who should be doing those things to delegate them the right way. I think a lot of leaders struggle with predictions, right? And somebody asked me the other day, how do you get good at predicting? I'm like, you predict, right? Like it's a trial and error thing. Like there's no way to get better at predicting. Yes, you can study your trends and all of those types of things and make more informed guesses, but the better you are at seeing where the puck is going, to quote Wayne Gretzky, the better you're going to be at planning and having that strategy and understanding what you are capable of doing in a quarter, in a year, over the course of 3 to 10 years, right? So a lot of organizations struggle with that. Like they don't know what their goals for the year should be. Like, how do I even begin to think about what I can or can't do? They don't have that prediction bug. You know, I think just on a couple more, I think people, you know, struggle sometimes with systemization, right? Like, how do I get all the things that I do know how to do and put them into processes and build in systems that can support and create the openings for everybody else to do their jobs really well? And then the point to structure. I think structure is a big one also. And I think it ties very nicely into the delegation, because a lot of times we're scared to delegate things because nobody's in a seat. So when we have clarity about how we need to be structured and what roles and functions need to exist in the organization, you gain that clarity of you know, that structure helps you gain clarity about a lot of other things, and it helps you simplify things, and it helps you delegate better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the main ones. And then one more part is I think that there's a lot of leaders that just struggle as being leaders, right? Where, you know, very few people go to school to become leaders. It's something that's almost an acquired skill at this point in time. And, you know, either they don't necessarily know how to relate with people and communicate with people well. They don't like to relate and communicate with people well. You know, there's trust issues at times, maybe warranted, maybe unwarranted. So there's also those, like, you know, the personal barriers sometimes that a business owner might be facing that they'll need to get through in order for these tools to actually work.
Yeah. Give me some that's an area I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into is you know, leaders whose, you know, personalities may not mesh with the leadership role that they find themselves in, and but for whatever reason they're in that seat because they are the best at what they do. How do you deal with it? How do you bring them to the place where they need to be in order for the company to be healthy, as you say?
So again, depending on what type of structure they have and what other people they have that could potentially take on those responsibilities, there's actually a tool in the EOS toolkit. And again, all these things are very simple concepts. So I could talk about it right now. There's a tool that we teach called the Delegate and Elevate tool, right?
Delegate and what?
Delegate and elevate, right?
And
Because
elevate.
when you do delegate the right tasks to the right people, number one, you're elevating your game. You're spending the time doing the things that you have the unique ability to do, where you're adding the most value to the company and the things that you enjoy doing. And you're elevating the game of that person who you've ultimately given those responsibilities or that accountability to, because A, they're probably better at it than you are. And B, now it gives them that motivation, and they get to raise their game and add more value into your organization. So they in turn become a higher performer by giving them those accountabilities and responsibilities. So the Delegate and Elevate tool is a very simple tool. It's a piece of paper. You divide it into 4 quadrants, right? We like our quadrants here in EOS. Quadrant number 1 in the top left corner, envision this in your brain, is the things that I'm great at doing and that I love doing, right? In an ideal world, that's the only things as a leader we're focused on doing. Move over to the right, top right corner, you have all of the things that you're good at doing and that you like doing, right? Simon Sinek has a quote, like, if you go to your wife and say, I like you a lot, like, she's not going to be so happy, right? There's a difference between like and love. Like is rational, love is irrational, good is adequate, great is exceptional, right? So we want to draw that differentiation between that I'm like super passionate and amazing at versus the things that I'm good at and I like doing them. It doesn't cause me pain. Then you move down into the bottom left quadrant and you've got the things that you're good at but you don't like doing, right? Like there are those things that we have in our lives that, like, okay, I'm good at sending recap emails, but I just don't like doing it because it's not necessarily the best use of my time or something like that. And then you move over to the bottom right quadrant, and that's like where you really don't want to be. Those are the things that you don't like doing and that you're not good at, right? Like, so for me, I always joke that that's finance, right? Like I suck with finance. It's something that I've never ever been good at. And if you have me doing that job, if when I started my practice, I'm running my books. Like, I don't like doing it. I'm not good at it. I don't know if it's being done the right way. So when you think about how this tool works, a leader will take a clarity break and they'll sit for an hour or two and fill this thing out and think about all the things they're doing. Sometimes they'll take this paper and literally just follow themselves around for a week or two. And as they start to do things, figure out, okay, that goes here, that goes there, and start to make sense of it. And then the best leaders now are going to attack that list in a chronological order, so to speak, right? You're going to first look at all the things that I don't like doing and I'm not good at. Those are the first things that you must delegate, right? Dan Sullivan, who, not how, right? Like, those are those things, right? Like, if you don't know how to run how to market a business, and you don't enjoy doing it and you're not good at it, find the marketing agency that can come in and do that work for you. That's the first quadrant that you have to attack. If you stink at finance, get yourself a bookkeeper right away, so that you don't have to spend time doing the things, A, that you're not good at and that you're going to mess up, and B, that you don't enjoy. And then if you're able to get rid of and delegate those things to the resources that do like doing them, that are good at them, go to the next quadrant. Now look at the things that, yeah, I'm good at it, but I don't really like doing it, right? Like, sending a recap email. Again, like, I love sending emails. I'm a good writer, even posting on LinkedIn sometimes. Like, I like to do those things. But if there's a way I could delegate that, because it's not the best use of my time, I don't necessarily like doing it. It's more of a necessity at that point in time. If I can get somebody to take on all of those things, right, that's going to help me up my game, because I'm not going to spend my time doing the things that aren't adding that much value to my personal life. So to me, if we look at my career, like, step one was find that bookkeeper when I started this business. Step two is bring in an assistant, right? Get a personal assistant who can take on a lot of that admin work, which I'm good at, booking travel and all those types of things. I could do it. Like, anybody can book flights and, but I don't really like doing it. And there are people that actually do like coordinating schedules for people and sending those emails and making sure the calendar is in sync. So that's hire number two, so to speak, as I'm looking to scale. And then I have like the things that I'm good at and that I like doing. And I haven't gotten to a point yet where I've dished those things off in this practice. But obviously, as you grow and as you scale and as you develop more capital, if you could start to get some of those things delegated as well, where 100% of your time is spent in that top left quadrant of the things I'm great at, the things I love doing, just imagine what your life is going to look like. So that's kind of how we help people process that.
Right. That sounds amazing. I'm like breathing a sigh of relief as I hear it. It just makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it's not, again, like, these aren't rocket science. You don't have to run in EOS to use the delegate and elevate tool, right? Like, you don't have to be an EOS organization. Yes, having EOS will help you create the structure, and you'll have the right clarity on who you should be giving it to, the seat, not necessarily the person. But at the end of the day, we all seek that clarity. We all want to, we all want to spend, we want to work at our pay grade, so to speak, and we want to do the things that we enjoy doing, because work doesn't have to suck. It could be a lot of fun.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about communication, because not everybody has the gift of communication that you have and that I enjoy. How do you help people come out of their shell to have the town hall meetings, the State of the Union addresses, the building trust activities? How do you, let's say someone is just reticent or just not so much of a people person, how do you, this is part and parcel of EOS, how do you bring it out of them?
So it's a good question. Not being a people person, if you own a business and you have a lot of people working for you, is going to be a big challenge for you. So, the number one thing is, like, try to figure out a way to, like, love your people. And usually when people don't like their people, they're not surrounded necessarily with the right talent and they don't have that clarity. So as you start to build a bigger and stronger and more cohesive team, hopefully we'll break down that barrier and you'll actually enjoy working with the people and supporting those people in the way that you are. And then the other thing is, having that structure actually helps. We talk about this concept in EOS of having a visionary and an integrator that lead our leadership team. They're two very, very different personalities, right? Our visionary is the person with all the big ideas, the big relationships, driving the culture of the business, sometimes a little bit ADD, right? Like, they show up to every meeting with like a bunch of ideas and maybe one or two of them are okay ideas, right? And then that integrator is like the polar opposite. The integrator is the person that really gets in the weeds, that has that like pulse of the organization, that that understands a little bit about sales, a little bit of operations, finance. They understand how everything works together and how to clear out those barriers. Whereas that visionary probably doesn't like to come down to the ground and have the difficult conversations. The integrator is there and they're good at those types of things. If the visionary is a little ADD, maybe our integrator is a little bit OCD, all right, and keeping things organized and structured. So, when you think about it that way, you don't necessarily have to have that visionary. If he doesn't want to get up and give those speeches in those state of companies, then you have an integrator who can do that just the same. So sometimes it's, not necessarily saying, hey, it's that guy's job to do this. Maybe it isn't. Maybe like that's one of those things that they don't like doing and they're not good at. So delegate that off to the person in the organization that is a little bit more the man or woman of the people that can relate. So that's number one, right? The other thing that we have though is that there is a framework, right? A lot of people don't feel comfortable getting up in front of people because they don't know what to say. They don't know how to present it. They don't know what people are going to think about it. So within the EOS process, we get to take it a little slower, right? We get to, bring them along at their pace. When they're ready to share the vision, when they feel really, really good about that vision, that's when you'll share it. What am I sharing with the vision? We have a very specific tool that captures that vision in 8 questions called the VTO. You just got to review this VTO with your people and they know everything they need to know, right? You have core values, which are the culture of the organization. It's the 3 to 7 behaviors that we as an organization, that's what we're going to use to guide our decision-making process. That's how we want to hire, fire, recruit, reward, recognize the top employees in our business, right? So when those become real and those are the lifeblood of our organization, it becomes a very natural thing to talk about, right? So it's a blend of like giving them the framework, giving them the content, so to speak, that's theirs, that they've actually crafted themselves, and providing the venue to share that breaks down a lot of the barriers. And also just maybe not forcing some of those people to be that person, right? Like I grew up, I was in the Miami Boys Choir. I don't know how many of your listeners know what that is, but it's a very, very famous traveling choir. And I was in it from 1989 to 1993, from the age of 9 to 13, performed at Carnegie Hall when I was 12 years old in front of thousands of people. None of that stuff phases me. Me getting up in front of a room, give me a mic, I'm good to go. Like set it and forget it. But then there's a lot of people that like struggle with that. Like it's just, that's my I naturally like, I don't fear the spotlight, so to speak, right? But then there's other people that it's just the worst thing, right? Like people say like they're more scared of public speaking than death, right? Like there are people that legit feel that way, that it's a very, very anxiety ridden thing. So maybe you don't have to do it, right? Like that sometimes is the answer, right? We don't have to force ourselves to be people we aren't, as long as we have other team members that can step up and fill those voids, because we do need to talk to people. We do need to share that vision. We do need to communicate and sometimes have the difficult conversations. But if you have people that do enjoy it and that are good at it, then it'll happen the right way.
Yeah. So interesting. Change when you bring EOS into a company, how does the change integrate? Because people are used to doing things one way, and then all of a sudden we have this, we're going to start we have a new operating system. So obviously it's going to be a culture shock in the beginning. And how do you integrate it so it's not so turbulent?
So everything is about process, right? Like we have a set proven process that we use to roll it out in businesses, and it's been used by over 25,000 companies. So we know it's got some legs at this point. And it's a spaced learning process, right? Where we're not just shoving everything down their throats on day one and saying, okay, now you got to go off and do all these things. Like it's a little bit of a slow burn. It's working on one tool at a time, getting really, really confident and secure with that tool as a leadership team. And then moving on to the next tool, getting really confident and secure using that tool, and moving on to the next one, then crafting that vision. And again, maybe it takes you a quarter, maybe it takes you 2 quarters. There's no rules as far as when you want to start rolling this out to the organization. The sooner the better, right? Like I would like to get my clients to a point where they're graduation ready in about 2 years, where I can make them self-sufficient, where they don't need to keep bringing me back. There are some companies that do that quicker. There are some companies that take longer. And it's the same way. Like we don't need to rush or delay a graduation. We don't need to rush or delay sharing that vision outside of the leadership team, right? So I think having that, confidence that you can run it at your own pace is very, very helpful, right? Some people it takes 6 months, some people it takes 9 months, some people 2 years, and they still haven't told anybody outside of the leadership team what they're doing as a business yet. So it's about what's comfortable and what growth looks like to you, right? Everybody gets to grow at their own pace. So I think that's kind of, the point that I was trying to hit home there. I think I maybe had something else, but I may have rambled myself off of it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Do you ever find that employees get threatened by the idea of EOS?
There you go. Now I remember what I was going to say. A little bit, right? But usually those are the employees that probably should feel threatened. We talk about this concept of, the EOS toolkit is a pressure tool, right? Because what it's going to allow to do, and it's going to create, you're going to have a lot of pressure that starts to build up as we start to look at some of the numbers more closely, and as we start to set priorities that we may or may not get done, and as we're starting to build a vision that if we don't accomplish these things, there's actually like meaning to it, right? And as we start to gain clarity and move along, the people in the organization are going to now start to feel a good kind of pressure, right? And if they lean on and they're into the greater good of the company and they want to help this company grow, usually those pressure tools help them excel and exceed, because now they know what their expectations are, they know how to measure it, they know how to hold themselves accountable, and your best employees are going to shine, right? But then there's the ones that this pressure is going to get to them, where it's going to be like, okay, this is scary. Now all of a sudden I have numbers that I need to hit. And now all of a sudden we have goals. And like, I don't like this. I liked it when we just got to come in and have a fun day at work and go home and not think about it anymore. Naturally with time, those lower performers, hopefully they start to leave your organization with time, right? Like in a good, and, they're not bad people. They're just not the right fit for your organization. We want people who want to grow the business with us. And if they don't see that those tools and the EOS process is something that's going to help them, if they're fighting it, so to speak, but the business isn't, it's going to be a problem for them. So that's part of it, right? Like I had a meeting with a prospect a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting in the conference room with, the CEO, the CFO, and there were different people from the organization, like walking by the conference room, like looking in to see like what's going on. And like the CEO told me, like everybody was asking him, like, what was that about? What was that about? And like, so there is like a level of like, okay, some of these people might be a little bit nervous, but then when they end up realizing what the tools are, right? Sometimes also people have their preconceived notions. They may have heard some things about EOS from somebody who maybe didn't have the best experience, because it's not for everybody, right? Not everybody's an entrepreneur. Not everybody's open-minded and willing to try a new way of doing things. Not everybody is as disturbed by change as they are than the status quo, right? Some people like the status quo a lot, right? So, it's about just educating them and showing them how the tools will add value, how it'll show them what a good day looks like, what a good week looks like. It'll actually give everybody extreme clarity on how they can perform to their best ability in their roles if they look at it the right way.
Right. We talked about in passing building trust with teams, and how does EOS address that?
We do it on a number of levels, right? There are some tools that help build trust. The VTO, right? Sharing the vision with the entire company and saying these are our revenue, these are our profit targets. That alone builds trust, right? We talk about quarterly conversations, not waiting till the end of the year, the beginning of the year, whenever you do your reviews, to meet with your people and tell them how they're doing and telling them ways to improve. Do that every quarter, right? If you can have a good, open, honest conversation every 3 months with your employees, first off, if they're the right people in the right seats, those conversations are going to be a lot of fun, right? It's usually not that much to talk about. It's how do I help you get to where you want to be, more so than we need to fix this, right? And if it is somebody that we need to get something fixed, now we have a more regular cadence. We don't have to wait a year to turn around and say, what just happened? We just lost another year and this issue didn't go away. We could set 90-day benchmarks to say, okay, like we need to start to see this behavior improve, or we need to see this skill, come to a different level so that we can really, really execute well. And when you're having those open, honest conversations with each other in a non-threatening way, I used to love when I was running my business for our quarterly conversations, I would always take my direct reports out for lunch. That was it. Like sit, eat lunch. I would have them do their assessment before I would do mine, and I would compare notes, and I would say, okay, like we're good on these like 5 things. This is really the one thing we need to hone in on. And it just becomes about growth for the business, growth for the person. So that's another way to build trust. When we get to an annual session with some of our clients, we do some trust builder exercises where we help people, share a little bit more about, their lives, their personal lives, even to a degree. Like I'm a big believer in radical candor, Kim Scott, that in order for you to address people directly and say what you need to say, you must care about them personally and deeply. If you don't care about them and you're not investing the time to get to know them as people, if you're going to give them direct and honest feedback, you're probably being a jerk because you're not really looking after their best interests. So, getting to know our people and asking questions like, how many siblings do you have? Where did you grow up? What was your first job? Those types of things, helping us get to know each other. There's deeper exercises that we can do to help show people where they maybe have some deficiencies on their team. And then there's just having that regular weekly cadence of having our meetings and having our issues that we talk about in a vulnerable way with our teams, having an opportunity at the beginning of those meetings to share the good news and the things that are happening in our lives, not just in the business, but in our lives. All of those things, kind of drive that healthy culture that we're looking for, and, dinners out with the team. Like, those things are important. Like, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not into the feelings and the emotions of the business. I don't need to take my people out to eat. Like, I just want them to work. They'd rather get the bonus. And they're probably like, no, they probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't rather have, the $100 to $200 that it would cost you to take them out to dinner. Like, to build that camaraderie, those dinners, like when you have like a great company event, everybody comes in totally electrified for weeks after that, talking about the stories, having all the memories, the holiday parties and all those types of things. Like, they get you through that first quarter, it really, really, those are important cultural benchmarks. So we want to get to that point where we enjoy spending time with each other and learning about each other and talking openly and honestly. Like, open, we need to be able to willing to listen and hear the things we need to hear. Honest, we need to be willing to say things that we need to say. And the more we talk, the better that gets.
Wow. Tell me some horror stories and maybe some before and
Horror
after.
stuff.
Yeah,
Think on this
some
one a little bit.
yeah, some situations where just everything went south, or and maybe how they got resolved.
Yeah, when we talk to prospective client about what EOS is, and we talk about whatever the fee structure looks like, and what our implementation process looks like, which has no guarantees and no obligations, no contracts or anything. Client can stop at any point in time, right? And what we tell them is that the real investment is in using these tools. The real investment is what you're going to be doing with these tools every single day to change your mentality, to change the way you think about your people, to they change the way you think about your vision and your business, right? So if a company is not leaning in on the tools, and using them the right way, they're just going to stop. They're just going to stop, right? They're just going to say, okay, like, we're good. We're just going to go back to, which is, so to that point, a lot of times the horror stories are avoided because those people don't usually get back to the table, right? You have clients where, the visionary and the integrator are two partners, and, they just hate working together, right? And they, like, where there's like underhanded things going on and end runs and a lack of respect and communication at the top, right? And that filters itself down to the team, where you have a team that doesn't necessarily trust each other or them to that degree. But as far as a horror story goes, not too many of them, right? Like I actually, like what most people see as a horror story, I see as opportunities, right? Like, you'll be in a session and you might have two people that, end up yelling at each other and get into a very, very heated and passionate, disagreement over a matter. Or you might have tears at a table sometimes where somebody really, really strikes a chord, and those are opportunities to grow. So to take that discomfort and grow through it. Whereas, in any other profession, if I was sitting in my past life at a table with a client and people started yelling at each other and angry, like, the project is dead, we're out of there. But when I see that stuff, start to happen, and it doesn't happen very often, but it does, happen sometimes. When it does, that's where I feel like I get the opportunity to shine also, right? It's where I get to really, really step into that facilitator role and make sure that people are being seen and heard, and using that conflict as an opportunity to bring us back to a healthy place, right? Where we do get to express ourselves, but also, agree to disagree, disagree and commit, realize that, like, we're not always going to see eye to eye. So in that sense, that I don't view any of those like struggles as a horror story, but yeah, there's been fights, there's been blowups, there's been, the leader who leaves in the middle of the session and doesn't come back. But nothing like too crazy. There's, I think there's more in their businesses, and, obviously, companies are dealing with things like lawsuits, and, if they're working with government programs and incentives that somehow disappear, and they have to figure out how they're going to rebuild their business around whatever new opportunities are out there. Those are the tougher things to deal with on a practical level. But in the room, as far as what we do, and again, maybe I'm naive, I haven't really seen any horror stories. I find them all to be actually rather entertaining, and we usually come out of them stronger on the other side, as long as we're willing to be open and honest about it.
Nice. Would you say when you come into a company, we talk about getting the finger on the pulse of the organization. It probably seems to me, at least from the outside, that a company has its own organism. It's got all sorts of personality to it, organisms integrating with each other. How do you quickly assess what the the nature of the organization, because everyone's different and they all really reflect the personality and behaviors of the leaders and the
Mhm.
employees. How do you swoop in and assess what needs to be done?
Yeah, so again, the point of such an assessment would not be for me to change anything about that. That's not really what my job is. It's really to gain a
Yeah.
better understanding of the culture and the people and how they can use help in terms of communicating. And a lot of the times it's really about, again, we have a process. And before we go into any engagement, some people will say, oh, that meeting is really your pitch. It's not a pitch. I call it a mutual fit assessment because I'm not going to work for everybody. People may want somebody who's a little bit more rigid and not as much fun as I am, right? So it's an opportunity for us to get to know each other, and it's an opportunity for me to get to know the business. So I have a handful of questions, very direct questions that I'm going to ask to understand how people think about the business. And the key is to facilitate everybody at that table answering the questions. If I'm meeting with just a single person, not going to get that pulse in the organization. Maybe I got a pulse for how that person works. But when you get 5, 6 people in a room for the first time, and you start asking them questions and you start to look around the room, and when you see like one person's answering it one way and the other person's not really seeing eye to eye, and you pick up on the body language, these are things that I've achieved through hundreds of sessions and seeing it. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's about asking the right questions and really focusing and listening and paying attention to a lot of those details, right? The person who's not talking and not speaking up, is it because they're shy, or is it because every time they speak up, they're getting shot down? The only way you're going to find out is to try to figure out a way to engage that person, to get them to speak and see what the reactions look like. And then you start to get a gauge for where things are and where you might have an opportunity to help or not help.
Wow, that's really interesting. It sounds like EOS is just is a very comprehensive tool for the health of an organization, for the health and growth of an organization.
We attack it at 6 levels, right? We talk about 6 components of the business. There's your vision, right? Which we talked about already, like setting those goals, answering the questions for where the business is headed, and sharing that with everybody. There's having the people. That's the second component, the right people in the right seats. We have our data component, right? Where we want to be making decisions based on facts and figures, not egos and emotions and our guts, right? We want to actually be looking at those numbers on a consistent basis and making those decisions. The fourth component is issues and how we're going to talk about ideas, right? An issue isn't always a problem. An issue could be an opportunity. It could be an idea. It could be a concept that needs to just be discussed. So if we're having good, effective communication there, it's going to help us talk about the right things with the right people. Processes is the fifth component of the business that we zoom in on, right? So making sure that we have those repeatable step-by-step instructions, not, a 2,500 page user manual, like 6 to 7 simple steps that can be visually illustrated so that people understand these are the steps we take in this company to do this function. And it'll also help train and onboard everybody else. Right? If I know how my operations team is providing the product and services, that's going to help me sell better. And if I know how people are going to sell our product and services, it's going to help me produce those products and that service a little bit better. Right? So that's the product part of things, really creating that clarity of exponential scale. And then there's the traction, right? Just doing the things and getting everybody into the system, making sure everyone has their own priorities, that everyone understands these are the areas where I'm going to focus my energy this quarter, make sure that everybody's in a meeting talking about those things and driving accountability throughout the organization. So yes, it is a comprehensive tool set, right? Most businesses are dealing with 100, if not 200 issues on average at any given moment, right? Between the people and the opportunities and the clients and the partners. But when you take a step back and you realize that all of those issues are rooted in those 6 components, it provides a much clearer framework for how you can process them and deal with them and make them go away.
Yeah. I just have one last question. And, we've talked about EOS for the business world. How does it translate into the not-for-profit world? Or let's say you're dealing with an organization where you don't have employees, but you have volunteers. A
Yeah.
lot of the companies run on idealism.
Mhm.
And in terms of delegation, it's maybe who has the time to do it, as opposed to who's the best fit for the role.
Yeah.
How would you advise integrating, or maybe you wouldn't?
No, I would, because to me, a nonprofit is still a business. It still operates like a business, right? When we think about the various components, the nonprofit still needs to have a vision, right? They want to know where they're going. It's not just about the here and now. Let's just make money and give it to people that need it. It's got to be a little bit more sophisticated. That so everybody, no matter what type of organization, profit or non, you need to have a vision. You need to know what your goals are and where you need to go. So in that sense, there's no reason why a nonprofit should not run on EOS. People, right? You think about a nonprofit, when we think about like the thresholds that we have for a business, just using that 10 to 250 number as an example, Yeah, so those nonprofits where there's not that many people, you have, one or two people that are running around and doing all the work and taking care of a little bit of this, and they're doing the fundraising, and they're also doing the event planning, and they're also doing the taxes at the same time, right? So, again, every organization, whether it's a profit or not, needs great people in the right seats doing the right things and sharing that culture and that same purpose. So yeah, we need that too, right? Data, the data component. A nonprofit needs data, right? For compliance purposes, for regulatory purposes, for just tracking what you're doing and if it's effective. So again, point for EOS, like nonprofit could run on EOS. Issues, every nonprofit has issues, just like any other business. We need to bring in people to help. These things aren't working. We're not, generating enough. We have an opportunity to sponsor this event and get some good, good publicity around it. What are the things we need to talk about, and having the right framework for those? Every business needs it, even a nonprofit. You've got your processes. Nonprofits are going to have processes. In fact, at a nonprofit, those processes might even be more important because we don't have that much waste. We can't afford to be inefficient, right? This is donated money that we need to put to a good cause. And every time we mess up because we weren't doing it the right way and following the process and doing it consistently, it literally takes money out of the pockets of the people we're trying to help. Those processes become extremely important for the nonprofit. And then finally, traction, right? Like nonprofits, you have that vision. I always say vision without traction is a hallucination, right? So yeah, they need to gain traction. They need to have the right meetings. They need to make sure they have focus on what the right priorities are. So in that sense, 100% EOS is helpful. It's been proven to work and help a lot of nonprofits. The barrier to entry a lot of the times is the financial commitment, right? That really is what it is. Or if there's a board that doesn't really allow the nonprofit to operate autonomously, where they're dictating this is what you need to do, and then they're just going out and doing it, yeah, EOS might not be able to help them so much. But at the same time, a nonprofit is a business, and often at times a lot of profitable business forget that they're profitable businesses and operate as nonprofits, where they're making bad decisions because they're not thinking about it from the business. They're thinking about feelings and emotions and egos and not making the right moves for that reason. So again, in that sense, a nonprofit a lot of times needs EOS or can use EOS or have a more successful EOS implementation, even more so than that typical business might.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us how we can find out about having an introductory meeting with you if there's a company that's interested.
My last name is hard to spell. So I have an alternate email address. It's adam.gold. So it's adam.gold. You don't have to worry about spelling my last name, at eosworldwide.com. So emails are always open. I have a website, eosworldwide.com/Adam-Goldschmidt, which is my last name. So you might want to put the link in the show notes or something like that to get people there. And my phone number, it's out there. So WhatsApp text 516-697-9634 is my cell number, and I give people my mobile cell number for a reason. Depending on what generation you're from, you call it different things these days. So I prefer to go with cell, but that might be dating myself a little bit. But a text, a WhatsApp, a call at any point in time. Obviously, I can't always talk, but I'm pretty good at returning my calls as soon as I can. So just reach out if there's any. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I really try to use my LinkedIn as my website to a degree, where I share a lot more of the content and the things that I'm thinking about and that are adding value to my network. And even if they're not bringing me in to work with them, I want to help them anyway and inspire them. So I like to share a lot of the things that inspire me and in that platform. And there's plenty of ways to get in touch with me, and more than glad to talk to anybody, whether they're target market or not, and just help them process and figure out how to solve some of their issues.
And who's a good fit to reach out to speak to you? Is it the leader? Is it the let's say maybe a person on the leadership team, or do you specifically deal with the CEO, or which?
Again, when we meet with our clients, we're meeting with the leadership team, right? We're not working with just the CEO. We're not just working with a specific department and focused only on sales. We're meeting with the leadership team, which is, your visionary, your integrator. Some organizations only have an integrator. It's the same person. And then those major functional leaders in the organization, right? The people that the owner may talk to whenever they have to make a decision, who's at the top of the food chain in the sales, operations, finance side of things. But we really meet with everyone, right? So as far as starting the conversation, a lot of the times, more often than not, it does root from an owner who's like, okay, how do I get this thing to the next level? Like, let's talk. But at the same time, a lot of the times it's triggered by somebody on the operations team that sees maybe some of the dysfunction that the owner doesn't see. And a lot of times they'll reach out and say like, hey, like, tell me a little bit more about this, and then using them as a way to educate and get in the room potentially with them. So it can come from any angle, but the business owners are the ones that typically like have that drive, that are the ones that get frustrated the most easily because they're not seeing their vision become that reality. And maybe it's because they're not clear with their vision. So like business owners usually is the one that I'm talking to, but titles mean very little in our world. It's really about more what you do. And if you're in HR and your job is to build a better culture and figure out a better way to do things in the business, then sometimes we come in through the HR person, right? It's various degrees depending on the organization.
Wow, really fascinating. Thank you so much for your time.
I
And
appreciate it.
back in touch
Great.
shortly. Yeah,
I
that
love
was
I love talking about what I do. I love sharing with people and helping. And if there's even a little nugget in here that helped anybody gain clarity, like it's totally great use of our time today. So I
okay.
appreciate you asking
Perfect.
me to join me today.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Adam. All right, we'll be in touch.
Have a great one.
Okay, bye bye.